In this video, we're going to cover the SAT practice test number 5 from the College Board. And in particular, we're going to cover module 1 of that test. Now, I'm only covering the math portion of that test, and this video only covers the module 1 math portion of that test. If you don't know, what I'm talking about is the paper practice test published by the College Board. You can find that at this website, or you can just Google College Board SAT practice test. Once you get to that website, you can see some full-length practice tests. There used to be bundles 1, 2, and 3, but as of February of 2025, they've eliminated those, and the only bundles left are 4, 5, 6, 7, and then there's added bundles 8, 9, and 10. We're covering the practice test in bundle 5, so that's practice test number 5. You can download the PDF. There'll also be a link to that PDF in the video description. And if you want the test answers and how to score your practice test, or a written explanation of how to do answers, then those are available too through the collegeboard.org site. Again, if you do download that test, it looks like this, the SAT practice test number 5. In this video, we're just looking at the math portion. The reading and writing portion starts the practice test, but once you get down to about page 30, then the math portion starts. Obviously, there's some formulas that we can use, and we may use, there's some directions about how to type your answers in. And then module 1 starts. Module 2 comes afterwards, but in this video, we're just covering module 1. So we'll start with question 1. So here we go. Practice test number 5, module 1. Question 1 says the graph of a system of a linear equation and a nonlinear equation is shown. What is the solution, x comma y, to this system? So all we have to do is know that a solution is where the two curves intersect, where the line intersects this nonlinear curve. And you can see it has x value of 4 and y value of 5. So that's the point 4 comma 5. And therefore, the answer to question 1 is C. So C is the answer to question 1, 4 comma 5. Question 2 says, on the first day of the semester, a film club has 90 members. Each day after the first day of the semester, 10 new members join the club. If no members leave the film club, how many total members will the film club have 4 days after the first day of the semester? So we can set up an arbitrary equation if we want, like the number of members is equal to 90, and then we're going to add 10 new members per day afterwards. I'll call that D. That would be the general equation for this. And it says what's going to happen 4 days after the semester. So we insert 4 into the number of days after the semester. So the number of members is going to be 90 plus 10 times 4. That's 90 plus 40, which is 130. And therefore, the answer to question 2 is B, 130. Question 3 says the graph of a linear function f is shown where y equals f of x. What is the y-intercept of the graph of f? The y-intercept is the point where we cross the y-axis. And we can see that that point, again, visually speaking, is at the point 0, 8. So since that is the point 0, 8, and I can just see that, all I have to do, I'll circle this, is say that our answer is answer D, 0, 8. Question 4 says, what is the solution R comma S to the given system of equations? So there's a couple of different ways to do this, but the easy way is to see that the second equation says R is equal to 3. So I know the R value is going to be 3 in the solution to the system. In the first equation, we have S plus 7R is equal to 27. The easiest way to figure out S is to realize that since R has to be 3, then I can just plug in a 3 for R and solve for S. We have S plus 21 is equal to 27. Subtracting 21 from both sides gives me an S value of 6. So we get that the answer to question 4, since we have to do R comma S, R comes first, S comes second, that's 3 comma 6. So B is the correct answer to problem number 4. Let's take a look at problem number 5. I'll start a new page there. Problem number 5 says the table shows selected values from function f. Which of the following is the best description of f? Notice that each time x is increasing by 1, f of x, or my output value, is also increasing by 1. Therefore, since as x increases, f of x increases, we know the function is increasing. And because it's increasing by a factor of 1 each time x is raised by 1, that's the property of a linear function. So we have a linear function which is increasing. And therefore, the answer to number 5 is B. It's an increasing linear function, which is our option B. Question number 6 says the graph of a system of linear equations is shown. The solution to the system is x comma y. What is the value of x? Well, we can see that these two lines cross at the point 4 comma 1. And that means the x value is 4. So the solution to the system is 4 comma 1. And that means the x value of 4 and the y value of 1. So this is just asking me for the x value, and that is 4. So 4 is the correct answer to that problem. Number 7 gives us a list of 7 numbers and then asks for the range of those 7 numbers. So what is the range? Well, the range, we should know, is the difference between the maximum value in the set and the minimum value in the set. In this case, the maximum value is 52 and the minimum value is 23. So if you take 52 minus 23, you'll get 29. And therefore, the range of that set is the number 29. So 29 is the answer to problem 7. Question 8 says, in the figure, line M is parallel to line N, and line K is intersecting both lines. Which of the following statements is true? And it says the value of X is less than 145, the value of X is greater than 145, the value of X is equal to 145, or the value of X cannot be determined. Well, interestingly enough, we don't need the fact that these two lines are parallel. That doesn't actually do anything for this particular problem, because what we're actually going to use is the fact that a straight line creates 180 degrees of angles. So if you look at line K, it's split by line N. And what we could do is say, well, since this angle is 145, if I take 180 minus 145, I know that this angle here has to be 35. That is 35 degrees. And since this is a straight line, and X and 35 have to add to 180, that means X has to be 145 as well. If you know that already about opposite lines, like these opposite angles of intersecting lines, then you can just use that fact as well. But opposite angles of intersecting lines are going to be equal. So this is going to be 145, and therefore the answer is C. X is equal to 145. Let's look at problem number 9. The equation x plus y equals 1,440 represents the number of minutes of daylights between sunrise and sunset, x, and the number of minutes of non-daylight, y, on a particular day in Oak Park, Illinois. If this day has 670 minutes of daylight, how many minutes of non-daylight does it have? So daylight is the X value, non-daylight is the Y value. And so if I know that the X value has to be 670, then 670 plus Y has to be equal to 1,440. And I can solve that equation by subtracting 670 from both sides. So take 1,440 and subtract 670, and we get Y equals 770. And that means the answer to number 9 is B, 770. So 670 minutes of daylight, 770 minutes of non-daylight. Question 10 says, Scott selected 20 employees at random from all 400 employees at a company. He found that 16 of the employees in his sample are enrolled in exactly 3 professional development courses this year. Based on Scott's findings, which of the following is the best estimate for the number of employees at the company who are enrolled in 3 professional development courses this year? So basically, what he found is that out of his sample, 16 out of 20 were enrolled in professional development courses. Since he's picking out of the entire company of 400, we can kind of project that by setting up a ratio. 16 over 20 is equal to some X value divided by 400. And then you can cross multiply if you'd like. So what we would do is take 16 times, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. You can multiply both sides, or excuse me, both the 16 and the 20 by 20 if you'd like. You could do cross multiplication if you'd like. You could solve it by clearing a denominator, multiplying both sides by 400 if you'd like. So lots of different ways to solve this. I think what I'll do is I'll do cross multiplication, 16 times 400. So multiply 400 times 16. That gives me 6400. Then I'd multiply 20 times x. That's just 20x. And then I can divide both sides by 20. And if I do that, I get 320 as the value of x. So the best estimate for how many employees are enrolled in exactly 3 professional development courses this year is 320, which is option B. Question 11 says, if 4x minus 28 is equal to -4, what is the value of x minus 7? Now, interestingly enough, you can solve this in a lot of different ways, but what I would do here is I would probably set up my equation as 4x minus 28 is equal to -24. Instead of finding the value of x, what I would probably do is just realize that if I factor out a 4 from the left-hand side, I end up with 4 times the quantity x minus 7. So if you can see that, then you can do it this way. And then dividing both sides by 4, we end up with x minus 7 on the left-hand side is equal to -6 on the right-hand side. So the answer to question 11 is C. -6 is the value of x minus 7. Now you could have also solved for x here and then plugged in the x and then subtracted 7, and you would have also got a -6. But again, this is a little bit quicker if you realize that factoring out a 4 gives you the quantity x minus 7 in parentheses. Question number 12 says, for a snowstorm in a certain town, the minimum rate of snowfall recorded was 0.6 inches per hour, and the maximum rate of snowfall recorded was 1.8 inches per hour. Which inequality is true for all values of S, where S represents the rate of snowfall in inches per hour recorded for this snowstorm? Well, basically, S we know at minimum is 0.6 and maximum is at 1.8. So what we're doing is we're giving bounds for S. 0.6 is the minimum value, so S has to be above that, but it also has to be below the 1.8. And therefore, D is the answer to question number 12. S is between 0.6 and 1.8. S is bigger than 0.6, but bigger than or equal to 0.6, but less than or equal to 1.8. Question 13 says a solution to the given system of equations is x comma y, where x is greater than 0. What is the value of x? There's a number of different ways we can solve this. If you want to, you can graph both of these and see where the graphs intersect. You can use a calculator to do that if you have a graphing calculator. Another way to solve this is to set the outputs equal to each other. Notice since y equals 4x and y equals x squared minus 12, I can replace the y in the first equation with x squared minus 12 and know that that has to be equal to 4x. So x squared minus 12 is equal to 4x, and then I can solve that for x. Now this requires us to solve a quadratic equation. I would subtract 4x from both sides. And then I would probably look for factors of negative 12 that add to negative 4. And the two factors that you want are a negative 6 and a positive 2. So I can rewrite that left-hand side. I can factor it into x minus 6 and x plus 2. Again, I'm choosing negative 6 and positive 2 because they multiply to give me 12 and add to give me negative 4. Now, since we have the right-hand side equals 0, we can say that either x minus 6 would have to be 0, or x plus 2 would have to be 0. The first equation, when I add 6 to both sides, gives me x is equal to 6. The second equation, when I subtract 2 from both sides, gives me x is equal to negative 2. Because of the fact that the x value had to be greater than 0, the only option we have is the x value of 6. So the answer to 13 is that x equals 6. And again, we get rid of this one because it's not above 0, and we'd have to use x equals 6. Again, answer to question 13 is just x equals 6 because our x value had to be greater than 0. Question 14 says a store sells 2 different containers of blueberries. The store's sales of these blueberries totaled $896.86, excuse me, $896.86 last month. The equation 4.51 times x plus 6.07 times y equals 896.86 represents this situation where x is the number of small containers and y is the number of large containers that are sold. And then the question says, according to this equation, what is the price in dollars of each of the smaller containers? So in terms of the smaller containers, x is the number of smaller containers sold. That coefficient of 4.51 has to be the price per container of the small containers. 6.07 would be the price per container of the large containers. This is only asking me about the smaller containers. So all that is saying the price is $4.51 or $4.51. This is just asking for what is the price in dollars. So it's $4.51. And that's it. That's the whole thing. "15 says a right circular cylinder has a base diameter of 22 centimeters and a height of 6 centimeters. What is the volume in cubic centimeters of this cylinder?" Now, this is a classic scenario in which we are looking for a geometry formula that gives us volume. And it turns out for a right circular cylinder, that formula is in the formula section of the test. Let's look at that. So the right circular cylinder, a cylinder is this guy. And when it says right circular, it just means this is straight up. These lines are straight up. Notice that the volume is given to me by pi times radius squared times height. And the radius is from the distance from the center to the outside edge. Obviously, the height is the height of the side. So here's our right circular cylinder. Here's our formula for volume, pi r squared times h. This is the formula that I'm going to use. Now, in this, read very carefully. It says the right circular cylinder has a base diameter of 22 centimeters. And the diameter is twice the radius. So if the diameter is 22, that means the radius is half of that, which is 11. So that's what I'm going to plug into my formula here. I'm going to plug in pi times 11 squared, and then multiply that by the height, which is 6. Now, all of these answers have pi attached, so they're the exact answers. And so all I have to do is take 11 squared times 6. When you do that, we get 726 times pi. So 726 times pi, or answer C, is the correct answer for problem 15. Problem 16 says the graph of the rational function f is shown where y equals f of x, and x is greater than or equal to 0. Which of the following is the graph of y equals f of x plus 5, where x is greater than or equal to 0? By the way, this is a shift up of 5 units. So basically what we would do is we take every point on the graph and we shift that up. So this one's a little bit above 2 when x is 4. And so we'd shift that up 5 units. And if you add 5 to 2, you get a little bit above 7. So we're going to be somewhere here. And that's going to be the same for every single point. We're going to shift up 7 units. It looks like we're at 6 and about 1.5. So I'm going to shift that up by 5 units. I misspoke earlier. Shift that up by 5 units. We would get about 6.5. And we'd follow this pattern. I'm not drawing it very well, but we'd follow the same shape, but just every point would be shifted up by 5 units. I might have shifted incorrectly here. So now we can go and look at what matches that idea. And we go look at our options. It's not A. A crosses the x-axis. It's not B. B gets close to the x-axis. We shifted everything up. It's not C. C looks almost the same. It's this D. D is the graph where everything got shifted up 5 units from the given graph. So we have the given graph just shifted up 5 units. And that's D. So D is in dog. Question 17 says, at a particular track meet, the ratio of coaches to athletes is 1 to 26. If there are X coaches on the track, which of the following represents the number of athletes at the track meet? Well, if coaches to athletes is 1 to 26, think of that as the ratio where one coach is the same thing. Let me put that. One coach is equal to 26 athletes. I'll just put C and A for the labels there. If there are X coaches, then there needs to be 26 times as many athletes. So that would be 26 times X athletes. And so the answer to question 17 is B. 26X is the number of athletes at this track meet. Let's take a look at problem number 18. Okay, Lonnie used fabric measuring 5 yards in length to make each suit for a men's choir. The relationship between the number of suits that Kaylani made, X, and the total length of fabric that she purchased, Y, in yards, is represented by Y minus 5X is equal to 6. What is the best interpretation of 6 in this context? So the total length of fabric that she purchased was Y. And maybe if you rewrite this equation, it might be a little bit more obvious. If I added 5X to both sides, I'd get Y equals 5X plus 6. She used 5 yards in length for each suit. So that's your 5X. Y is the total number of yards purchased. So 6 would be the leftover amount that she did not use at all. And therefore, the answer to 18 is D. Kaylani purchased 6 yards more fabric than she used to make the suits. She made the 5X, that was how much fabric went into the suits, and then 6 was left over, and that was the total amount she purchased. So she purchased 6 more yards than used in the suits. So the answer to question 18 is D. '19 says, what is the value of 92 pi over 3? Now, what I would do in a question like this to solve it, I like to solve this in the easiest way I can. I would take 92 pi over 3 and input it as tangent in my into the tangent function in my calculator, making sure that the mode of my calculator is in radians. Since we're talking about 92 pi over 3, that's a measurement in radians. So take tangent of 92 times pi divided by 3. And what I ended up with is a negative 1.732050808 on my calculator. And so it's my job just to figure out what is the specific version of that. And this is obviously a rounded decimal number. So if you wanted to, you could put approximately. Obviously, it's a negative number. So answers, excuse me, answers C and D are out. So we just need to test A and B. So compute negative square root of 3 on the calculator, and then compute negative square root of 3 divided by 3 on the calculator. And you'll see the one that is negative 1.73205, et cetera, that is basically negative square root of 3. So negative square root of 3 is the answer, and that's A. That's how I would have done that. You can also do that using some unit circles as well if you'd like. You'd have to know quite a bit about unit circles to do that, but you could do that. The easy way is to do this on the calculator. I don't think that, again, most people won't do this on the unit circle. Most people don't know the unit circle outputs, but you'd have to know that 92 pi root 3 on the unit circle is the same ending angle. So it's the same ending angle as 2 pi over 3. And then you'd have to figure out what the tangent of 2 pi over 3 is. And so if you did the tangent of, 2 pi over 3, and you knew what the unit circle looked like, then you could say, oh yeah, that is based off of the unit circle, negative the square root of 3. Or we take negative of root 3 over 2 divided by 1/2, which is negative root 3. So you could do that as well because 92 pi over 3 and 2 pi over 3 have the same terminal value on the unit circle. Again, I like to use my calculator. Much, much quicker, much easier. And you don't have to memorize the entire unit circle. Question 20 says, in the triangle shown, what is the value of cosine of x, or cosine of x degrees? Now, here's the deal. In order to do this problem, we should remember the mnemonic SOHCAHTOA. That means sine is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse, and cosine of an angle, in this case, cosine of x, is going to be equal to the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. Tangent would be opposite over adjacent. But so sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. And what we mean by that is the lengths of those sides. So if you look at x, the side adjacent to x, that's the leg adjacent to x, is 11. And the hypotenuse of this right triangle is 28. So I end up with 11 over 28 as the cosine of x. That's how I would leave my answer. And when you read the directions of this test, it actually says you can leave your answer as a fraction as long as we don't have too many digits. If you were insistent upon giving a decimal version, you'd have to round it. And this test asks you to round things if you're rounding them. To 4 digits. So 0.392. to 9 as a rounded version. Okay, that's all in the instructions. Let's take a look at that real quick. So here it says, if your answer is a fraction, oh, that is too long, over 5 characters for positive, 6 characters for negative, write the decimal equivalent. Well, our fraction was not over 5 characters. So like I said, I would have just left it as a fraction of 11 over 28 and been done. If we did need to write it as a decimal, again, over 5 characters for positive, 6 characters for negative, truncate it or round it to the 4th digit. And for us, the 4th digit was a rounding of 0.3929. So that was the decimal version. But again, I would have left it as a fraction because it's not over 5 characters long. It's exactly 5 characters long. And by characters, they mean 1, 1, the division symbol, and then 2, 8. So 11 over 28, exactly 5 characters. So I would have left it as a fraction. For 21, it says the function g is defined by g of x is equal to x plus 14 times t minus x, where t is a constant. In the xy plane, the graph of y equals g of x passes through the point 24, 0. What is the value of g of 0? So if my function passes through the point 24, 0, that means when you plug in 24 into the g, you get out a 0. So this means that this expression of x plus 14 times t minus x, when I plug in 24 in for both values of x, I should end up getting a 0. What that means is that 38 times the quantity t minus 24 is equal to 0. Dividing both sides by 38 gives me t minus 24 is equal to 0. And so now I know that t has to be 24. Now, this is not the final answer yet. The final answer is the value of g of 0. So now I have to plug in 0 into my expression and see what that comes out as. So we'd get 0 plus 14 multiplied. Now I know that t is 24, so that's going to be 24 minus 0. When that's all said and done, it's going to be 14 times 24, which is 336. So the answer to question 21 is 336. That's what you get out when you plug in a 0 into G. Again, we had to find the value of t first and then plug in 0. Question number 22 says the graph of the given equation is a circle in the xy plane. The point AB lies on the circle. Which of the following is a possible value for A? Interestingly enough, what we're doing is we're looking at this equation of a circle and we're seeing how big can this get here with the x plus 4 squared. Now I want to point out that when you take x plus 4 and square it, it's going to be positive. And also, when you take y minus 19 and square it, it is going to be positive. In order to maximize the value of x plus 4, you'd have to minimize the value of y, maximize the value of x plus 4 squared. You'd have to minimize the value of y minus 19. Since I know that this is at smallest 0, I know that x plus 4 squared plus 0 is always going to be less than or equal to 121. It's got to be, because that's the equation in the circle. So the minimum value for y minus 19 squared is 0. And that means the x plus 4 quantity squared has to be smaller or equal to 121. So what values of x can I plug in there? That's really what we're asking to say if the point AB lies on the circle. If I plugged in a negative 16, I'd get negative 16 plus 4, which is negative 12, and then I'd square that and get 144. So negative 16 is not going to work. It's too big. If I plugged in a negative 14, I'd get negative 14 plus 4, which is negative 10. Squaring that gives me 100. So negative 14 does work. It is such that when you plug it in here, meaning when I plug in negative 14 for x, I do get something that is less than or equal to 121. In particular, I get 100 is less than or equal to 121, and that's true. When I plugged in negative 16, I got 144 less than or equal to 121, and that was not true. If you'd plug in 11, you'd get 15 squared, and that's above 121. In fact, 15 squared is 225, which is well above 121. And if you plug in 19, you get 23 squared, which is above 121 as well. So the only possible value for x here, the only possible point which you could have, has an x value which is negative 14, the only option of these four that work. So this is the completely algebraic way that you could solve this. You could also solve this through another method, and that's more using intuition. So if you think about it, this is the equation of a circle. The circle is centered at negative 4, 19. And we know that because that's the equation of the circle. So it's centered at negative 4, 19. And the radius of this circle is 11, because that's, again, the square root of 121. So at most, the x value, which starts at negative 4, well, x values are going to be between, we're going to start at negative 4 and subtract our radius of 11. And we're going to start at negative 4 and add our radius 11 going the other way. So the x values are all between negative 15 and positive 7. And the only option for x values in that range of our options is B, negative 14. Hopefully that makes sense. The logic is saying we have our center, we have a circle around that center. So the x values can go only a maximum of the radius left and a maximum of the radius right. And if you go maximum radius left, you get to negative 15. Maximum radius right, you get up to 7. And so x values can be between negative 15 and 7. If you get beyond there, you're not on the circle anymore. So either way you do this, you end up with the answer of B, which is negative 14. '23 says a right rectangular prism has height of 9 inches. The length of the prism's base is x inches, which is 7 inches more than the width of the prism's base. Which function V gives the volume of the prism in cubic inches in terms of the length of the prism's base? Again, this is one where we have to use a geometry formula. So let's go and look those up. When it says rectangular prism, it's referring to this block shape. So rectangular prism is just a rectangle. It looks like a brick or a block. And the volume is length times width times height. So we just have to multiply the length, the width, and the height. The base is the length and the width, and then the height is obviously the height. So base is the bottom, length, width, and then height. So volume is length, width, height. And it doesn't matter what order you write those in. And this one says, well, the height is 9 inches. So we're just going to replace the H with a 9. The length is X. Let me write V equals. So we replace the L with an X. And the width, oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I misspoke. The length of the prism's base is X inches. Okay, and that which is 7 inches more than the width. Now that's a little bit tricky. 7 inches more than the width means that the width is 7 inches less than the length. So the width is going to be 7 inches less than the length, which is X minus 7. And so that's the value. Now, in our case, these things have multiplied in certain ways. The order of multiplication doesn't matter. So if we rewrite this, we can put the 9 in front, and then the x, and then the x minus 7. And you can see that the volume function is given by letter D, as in dog. So 9x times quantity x minus 7. And so D is the final answer. Again, the key there is seeing that the length is x, which is 7 more than the width. So that means the width is 7 less than the length, or 7 less than x. 24 says, which of the following function has or have a minimum value at -3? We have -6 times 3 raised to the x power minus 3. And g of x is -3 times 6 raised to the x power. Both of these are exponential functions. And because we can plug in any real number we want into an exponential function, we can plug in 0, we can plug in positive values, we can plug in negative values. And that's the real trick. If you plug in a 0 into function f, you get -6 multiplied times 3 raised to the 0th power minus 3. And what you see there, so this is what happens when you plug in 0. This first piece, 3 to the 0 power becomes 1. 1 times -6 is -6, minus 3 is a -9. So obviously function number, or 1, our first option, that can go under -3. -3 is above -9. So f of x does not have minimum value of -3. By the way, if you plugged in a 20 or a 30, you would also get smaller values. In a similar way, we can plug in lots of different values into g of x. Let's plug in the number 1 into g of x. -3 times 6 raised to the first power. That's going to give me a -18, which is also smaller than -3. So with those two plugins, we can see that neither I nor II, neither the f of x or the g of x, has minimum value of -3. Another option you could use is you could just graph these and see that the y values go below a -3 on both of these. If you have access to a graphing calculator, that's pretty straightforward too. If you don't have access to a graphing calculator, just realize we have lots of negatives, and so the bigger the x is, the smaller these get. And I obviously use 0 and 1. You could use lots of other x values as well. So D is the answer, neither I nor II, neither 1 nor 2, Roman numeral 1 or Roman numeral 2, has minimum value of -3. Let's take a look at 25. It says the result of increasing the quantity x by 400% is 60. What is the value of x? Now, increasing by 400% means that I take 1 plus 400%, which is 4.00 as a decimal, and then I multiply that by x. That would be increasing a quantity by 400%. I start with 100% of that quantity, and then I increase it, I add on 400%. As a decimal, 400% is 4.00. And the result of doing that should give me 60. Here we see that x is being multiplied by 5 to give 60. Dividing both sides by 5 gives me x is equal to 12. So the answer to question 25 is that x is equal to 12, which is answer A. So A is the answer to 25. The key there is increasing a quantity is not just multiplying by 400%, but it's actually multiplying by 1 plus 400%. Question 26 says the function f is defined by f of x is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are constants. The graph in the xy plane, the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane, passes through point 70 and -3, 0. If a is an integer greater than 1, which of the following could be the value of a plus b? So in this case, we're looking at a quadratic equation, and because the a is positive, I know we're pointing up. We have a parabola pointing up. It's going through the points -3, 0 and 7, 0. Those are the two x-intercepts. And there's a couple of different ways in which we can solve this, but I'll go through the most straightforward way that I know. So the way I look at this is I look at this that these 2 points are the x-intercepts. And so I know that the vertex is going to be right in the middle of those x-intercepts. So the vertex is going to have an x value, which is right in the middle. Let me cancel that. So we're going to be in a situation where the vertex is x value is determined by the halfway point between 7 and -3. So we take 7 plus -3, whoops, and then divide that by 2. So the vertex has to have x value of 2. Now, another thing that I know about the vertex of a quadratic function is that the vertex has x value, which is opposite of b over 2a. And so now I know that opposite of b over 2a is actually going to be equal to 2, which implies that, well, thinking about opposite of b over 2a equals 2, I can multiply both sides by 2a and get that 4a is equal to -b. Now, a has to be an integer which is greater than 1. So this is going to tell me that b is going to have to be negative. So because I need an integer greater than 1 is a. And so if I have b as positive, the opposite of a positive number is going to give me a negative. Therefore, I need the opposite of a negative number. So this tells me b is negative. And it also tells me that the absolute value of b, it's negative, but the absolute value of b has to be equal to 4 times the integer a. So b is actually in absolute value greater than a. So if b is negative and it has a larger size than a, then that immediately tells me that a plus b is also going to have to be negative. So C and D are out already. The only options are A and B at this point. Okay. So let's check each of those options manually. So here's how we check each of those options manually. We say if, let me go through this. So if A plus B is equal to -6, that means A is equal to, when I subtract B from both sides, -B -6. Plugging that into our equation, which says 4A is equal to -B, gives me 4 times negative b minus 6 in parentheses is equal to negative b. We're going to solve that equation. Negative 4b minus 24 is equal to negative b. Add b to both sides, add 24 to both sides. We get negative 3b is equal to positive 24. So in this case, b would be negative 8. We already knew that b was going to be a negative. That's good. If b is negative 8, then plugging that back into this equation, the negative of negative 8 is a positive 8. So 4a would be positive 8. And a would be 2. So I don't have any issues in that case, or at least seemingly I don't have any issues. Let's look at the other case. Let's look at if a plus b were equal to a negative 3. That was my other option. Then I could say a is equal to negative b minus 3, and I can do the same process. I'll do this one a little bit quicker. We know that 4a is equal to negative b. So replacing a with a negative b minus 3, and then solving, it turns out you're going to get negative 3b, and then you're going to have equal to positive 12. So b would be a positive, or excuse me, a negative 4. But if b is a negative 4, since 4a is equal to negative b, that means 4a is equal to the opposite of negative 4, which is positive 4. And a would be 1. Now you might think, well, that doesn't throw me off either. Like we could have a of 1 and b of negative 4, or we could have a of 2 and b of negative 8. And right now, both of those may seem reasonable, but what we said at the very beginning was that a is an integer value that is greater than 1. Greater than 1 does not mean equal to 1. And so the only option we had where we ended up with an a value that's greater than 1 is when we let a plus b equal negative 6. So when a plus b was negative 6, a was 2, and b was negative 8. And so the answer to question 26 is A, negative 6. So that's the idea. Vertex is opposite of b over 2a, and then that comes with this equation. And then I have another equation, which is a plus b equals negative 6, or a plus b is equal to negative 3. We solve those, we get a solution essentially for each pair of equations. One is 4a equals negative b. The other is a plus b equals negative 6. We get a solution, and then we see which solution fits. And obviously this one did not fit because a needed to be bigger than 1, an integer value greater than 1. Let's take a look at problem 27. Problem 27 says the function g is defined by g of x is equal to x times x minus 2 times x plus 6 squared. The value of g of 7 minus w is 0, where w is a constant. What is the sum of all possible values of w? Well, think about this. What possible values, we'll call them, what possible numbers z can I plug in to get out a 0? These are called the zeros of a function. Well, the zeros of a function happen when you get out a zero. So they happen when x is 0, because we can let each component. So let me speak this. We're asking, when is g of x is equal to 0? So when is x times x minus 2 times x plus 6 quantity squared equal to 0? Well, it's equal to 0 when x is equal to 0. It's also equal to 0 when x minus 2 is equal to 0. And it's also 0 when x plus 6 is equal to 0. So we have 3 options for when x is 0. And those 3 options are either when x is 0, or when x is equal to a positive 2, or when x is equal to a negative 6. And we're saying 7 minus w, when I plug that in, we get out a 0 where w is a constant. What is the sum of all possible values of w? Well, we can replace each x with just 7 minus w. So 7 minus w is equal to 0. Or, let me write the word or 7 minus w is equal to 2. Or 7 minus w is equal to negative 6. Solving the first equation gives us w is equal to 7. Solving the second equation gives me a w which is equal to 5. Solving the third equation gives me a w which is equal to 13. So what is the sum of all possible values of w? I take 7 plus 5 plus 13, and we get the sum, which is equal, to 25. So 25 is the answer there. By the way, the fact that x plus 6 is being squared doesn't mean I get a new x value, doesn't mean I get a new 0. It just means I have that 0 has multiplicity of 2. So that's just 1 0 that I have to count. So the answer here is 25. 7 plus 5 plus 13 becomes 25. So that is the end of Module 1 of Test 5 from the college SAT practice. And again, if you want a link to that test, it should be in the description of this video. And also, there'll be another video on Module 2 of Practice Test 5 and other videos on Modules 1 and 2 of the other practice tests published by the College Board.